All right, good evening and welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting for Monday, January 11th. All meetings of the Select Board are recorded except for our executive sessions. If anyone's recording this meeting, please make it known to the chair. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Select Board will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and a requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the AG's webpage. The town will persevere to use conference call capabilities regularly for other parties to listen in and participate accordingly. If not possible, we will post on the town's website an audio recording as soon as possible after the meeting. At this time, if we could all please rise and have Chief Anderson lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag,
United States of America,
to
to the republic
which
which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And Mr. Fox, will you do the honors, please?
Mr. Chairman, we unfortunately had another longtime member of our community, Connie Johnson, who passed away. Connie was a worker for us in later years, but she's also worked for our school system. But a tremendous lady. Her husband, of course, Eldon John, was our postmaster for many years. Just good people. So if we could please have a moment of silence for Connie Johnson. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, the floor is open for public comments. If anybody has any comments that they'd like to direct at, well, mostly Joe, but anyone, now's your chance. If you could just state your name and address for the record.
Come on, there's got to be one,
Come on, nobody?
at least one wise ass remark. Nothing? Oh, I'm
All right,
disappointed.
don't sell past the close.
I'll
So,
work for next week.
okay, we've got a couple of minutes until our appointment, so we'll knock out a couple of things here. We'll acknowledge our payroll warrant number 2114 dated January 5th in the amount of $218,005.37. And a payable special warrant 2119B dated January 6th in the amount of $2,475. And a payroll special warrant 2115 dated January 7th in the amount of $901.72. And I need a motion for the minutes from our open session of January the 4th.
Joe Didi will make that motion.
Russ Fox will second.
It is a roll call vote. Doug Moglen, aye.
Joe Didi, aye.
Russ Fox, aye.
Excellent. Which that takes us right to 5:35. So at this point, we have members of the Westcom dispatch and as well as our Southwick police chiefs and fire chief and deputy chief with us. So who wants to kick off the discussion here first?
Well, Doug, I think you know, Carl and the command staff went and visited with Westcom here a little over a month and a half ago, and saw the presentation. And after that presentation, it was decided to bring that presentation forward to the board for review. So that's basically what tonight's about, is an opportunity for Aaron Hastings from Westcom to give their presentation, ask and be able to ask questions and go from there.
Excellent. And I'm sorry, I was in the middle of looking at this. Who's going to be presenting for Westcom?
Aaron Hastings.
Hi, Aaron. How are you?
I'm good. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. Is it possible to get a screen share?
Yep. Give that a try.
Can you see the presentation okay?
Not yet. Can anyone see it?
It's
Now
coming.
it's coming on
There it
now.
is.
Well, thank you for having me this evening. I just wanted to go over a quick presentation about Westcom, and then I can take some questions at the end. So I'll go over who we are, how we're governed, what the benefits are if you were to join, what kind of services we do provide, and then how you go about joining. Obviously, our mission is we want to create a regional emergency communication center that provides excellent service to the communities that we serve. So we are striving towards accreditation in all three fields, in police, fire, and EMS dispatch. We have recently purchased the old Salter College on Shawinigan Drive off of the Turnpike. We are renovating that. We got $2.65 million to purchase and renovate. So we're transitioning from a 750 square foot facility to an 18,000 square foot facility because we do plan on taking on several other towns. We built the center based on redundancy. The power, the radio, and the voice are all done through microwave links to the different towns and through a fiber connection. So if one goes down, it comes back through the other. And we are handling phase 1 and phase 2 calls for state 911. We currently serve Chicopee, East Longmeadow, and Munson. We did over 150,000 calls for service last year. We have 25 full-timers, 5 part-timers, 3 supervisors, and 6 administrative positions. We do run a minimum of 6 on the day and eve shifts, and then 4 on the midnight shift with the 4 towns that we cover. And myself and my deputy, I come from a regional that I was at for 20 years, a regional dispatch center for the state police. I was also a part-time police officer and an EMT, and my deputy actually was the deputy director in Springfield. So she comes from a high-volume call center and brings a lot to us. Our governance is a district agreement that all the municipalities sign, and the board of directors governs the district. So we have 1 representative. It's usually the highest ranking official of a town or city or their designee that belongs to the board of directors. And every town gets 1 vote. Our operations committee is comprised of the police chiefs and fire chiefs for each municipality that we serve. And then we have 1 finance person from each municipality as well that helps us with the budget and going over some of the questions throughout the year that we come across with municipal purchasing. Some of the greatest benefits of coming to Westcom is your financial benefit. State 911 has been trying to get regionalization going in the area for quite some time, and they decided to throw a lot of money at it in order to have it succeed. So they offer 2 different grants every year. One is a development grant, and that's for, it's a competitive grant. There's $32 million available, and they prioritize it to existing regionals that are taking on new towns. So with that being said, we're at the top of the list for getting their money. We've gotten over $8 million off of development grants in the last 3 years. There's seconds, and the development grant also covers if you needed new radio systems in order to come on board, new infrastructure. It covers the renovations for Salter College for us, and it'll cover the contents as well. We also have a support and incentive grant that we get yearly. Every PSAP in the state has been offered the support and incentive. The only thing different with ours is that they cover 75% of our operational budget every year. So in turn, we get to send that savings on to you. So we charge the municipalities that belong to us 25% of our operational budget. We break it down by 50% is the population compared to the total population that we covered, and 50% is the call volume compared to our total call volume. So that's how the breakdown is for the cost if you were to join Westcom. The support and incentive, like I said, covers the operational budget, but that 25% that we're paying through the development grant, State 911 is offering that back to the towns, to reimburse back to the towns 100% for the first 3 years they join, 50% for the 4th year, and 25% for the 5th year. So essentially, they are paying 100% of our budget for the first 3 years for any town that comes on board. We have the ability to upgrade your radio equipment, your computer-aided dispatch, your fire alerting systems through the development grant as well. Another benefit, if you were to join, is our regional interoperability. You know, we have one dispatcher, if they get a structure fire in Long Meadow and they need East Long Meadow on a first alarm, they just sit there and tone it out. They don't have to make a call to another department somewhere. They have more situational awareness. They're aware of what's going on in this. If you have a pursuit that's coming from one town into another town, they know it's coming. They're already on the radio. So they keep that as one of the benefits. And the officers is this is actually one of the funny benefits that we discovered after we opened. The Long Meadow chief informed us that his officers no longer hang out at the station because they're not bringing dispatch dinner or covering a bathroom break. They're out on the road more, so they're being more productive. And each agency that becomes a part of Westcom has a voice. Everybody has an equal vote, and we determine what the best practice is as a group. We also are preparing for the future, and that's one of the reasons we've purchased such a large place. We don't know what 911 is going to look like in 5 years or in 10 years. We know there's going to be video, and the dispatchers will be looking at that directly at a 911 call. We don't think a single dispatcher is going to be able to handle that, or a small regional. So we're training now for the technology. We're preparing. What we want to do is a live crime analysis in our dispatch center so that when videos come in, we have a different department that can filter them and assist the officers in the call. We also have money for training for our dispatchers, where single PSAPs only get 16 hours of training. We're allowed 32 hours. We make that mandatory for our dispatchers, so they do have to get 32 hours for recertification every year on their 911. We have a dedicated training coordinator, and we run a roll call on every shift Monday through Friday. So it's continuous training, even if it's just that 15 minutes a day. We're meeting with the dispatchers, and we're making sure that they're performing up to where we need them to be to reach accreditation. Our core services are basically what any dispatch center would give you. We do your 911 calls, we take business lines, we run the radios, we call the highway departments, we call the animal control officer if you need us to. We run BOPs and warrants and everything that your dispatch center does for you now, we would offer the same services. The two things that we don't offer through Westcom is answering calls for burning permits and scheduling non-emergency transfers for an ambulance service. We found that those things would take away from our service, so we do not offer them at this time. We maintain your CAD. We also pay for your CAD, your computer-aided dispatch. So the IMC system that the police department uses, we take over the maintenance on that, and we pay for all the upgrades. We also do the automated box alarm systems for any town that has them. Or the call alarms that come in, we'll take care of those. And we also have access to the different towns' code red or whatever reverse 911 system that they're using. So we can put out emergency messages if we need to. Finally, our dispatchers will offer a community outreach program once COVID is contained. We will go out to senior centers and explain to them who we are and where they're calling when they call and what kind of service they can expect and what kind of questions we'll ask them. We'll go to health fairs at the school as well, or any place where we feel that there's a need to educate people on 911. We take all the department inquiries for recordings. So we have all the recordings for court, for the 911 calls, which saves your officers time too, because they don't have to search for recordings. We can do that all, send them out by email to the district attorney's office if needed. Once you decide to come on board, we're at the point now where we're doing the presentation and the quote. if you were on board with us this current fiscal year, it would have cost you $100,000 for our $3.2 million budget. You would be paying 9.62% of the share, and that's determined again by your call volume and your population. So we provide all those services to you at a cost of $100,000. Once we're done with the presentation, if you decide this is the way you're going to go, we would need your community to take a legislative vote and sign a letter of intent. And then we would do an actual feasibility study to see what's best for your radios and for your CAD and the best way to connect us. And then from there, we would vote to put you on, and we would have you sign the district agreement. We do expect that we won't be taking anyone on in less than 12 months, only because of the move right now into Salter. We're expected to close on that next week, and then we start our construction or reconstruction. But we'll get you a transition plan as soon as you give us a letter of intent and an actual estimated timeline. We keep everybody informed as to the progress on the onboarding. I can meet with the Board of Selectmen at any point during it. I also will be constant interaction with the police and fire chiefs as well, and any other municipal departments that are needed, highway, ACO. And that's really our whole thing in a nutshell. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Aaron, one question on the new facility. Is that building have to be gutted and redesigned, or is it partly usable, or what?
No, it's actually in fairly good shape. What we're doing is taking down some walls on the top floor so that we have the dispatch center is bigger than what the offices are up there. And we have to put in a lifted floor and then add more bathrooms to the top floor. So that's our renovations for that.
Okay.
And I don't have a question, but I'd like to have a statement just to give a little bit of history of how we got here to this point. This started, I don't know how many years ago, Russ, you might remember more, but 7, 8 years ago when 911 was coming in and trying to make these things happen. Southwick was involved with 6 or 7 towns back in the time. They were doing all the study and trying to come up with grants. It was just a lengthy process. And the bottom line is they could never come up with what a dollar amount, what it could cost for Southwick to join these other towns. That fell by the wayside. Westfield kept reaching out to us to ask if we would like to go in with them. The board would always sign a letter of intent that we asked them to do the studying. Westfield went for grants every 2 years, and each year they would get turned down when they wouldn't even give us the money to do the feasibility study at that point in time. This is a different approach we had at this point in time because we're just asked by the board to go and meet with Erin, watch her presentation, and before we left that meeting, we knew what the dollar amount was going to be. So it's like all the homework has been done to a certain extent about feasibility. If it's even feasible for Southwick to be part of this group or not. Now we just got to also take a look at what is best for Southwick, but that's what got us to this point right now at this point in time.
Yeah, and I believe both chiefs also want to look at the process of what happens when you enter into one of these agreements in terms of what some of those issues that Aaron talked about that aren't done by this entity, like the burn permits and things of that nature, and then what types of issues that we would identify for addressing the dark station criteria that the fire chief has referred to in his report.
And off of that, Carl, Aaron, why don't you explain a little bit more about the full workings of a what they call a dark station? How does the lobby work? Cameras? Are there monitors there? I think it's a lot of the questions I'm getting from my officers as far as what the dark stations consider for the lobby purposes.
Sure. So part of the development grant does allow us to put cameras in and intercom or a two-way phone that ring. As soon as they pick up the phone, it rings directly to us and we can see them on the camera. We generally have, the other departments will have all the forms that they need in the lobby in the same order so that we can tell them it's the third one down on the right if it's just something that they're looking for. Or if it's a call that they actually need to report, we'll have an officer come in off the street and talk to them.
Now, if a person does come in and they don't see the phone on the wall, do you guys monitor it enough where you could instruct the person to pick up the phone and speak to you at that point in time?
That's correct. We do have the cameras up on the wall in the dispatch center so the dispatchers can reach out to the person.
And in most of the stations, is that 24/7?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a follow-up to that, Mr. Chairman. One of the seminars that I attended, like Kevin said, we've been looking at this probably for over 9 years. One of the seminars I attended at the Mass Municipal, when they talked about these issues of a dark station, it was mentioned that there was the possibility that if somebody had an emergency in the middle of the night, went into that lobby, there would be the possibility of locking the door after them so they'd be safe if they were being chased. Is that done at any of your other dark stations, Aaron?
We do have door controls for 3 out of the 4 stations that we dispatch for, so we can
Okay.
lock the door.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question? For regular police business transactions, for example, looking for a police report or something of that nature, it would just be a matter of picking up the phone in the lobby and calling the business office during regular business hours?
Some of the stations have put on part-time clerks to cover things for, like, if they're coming in for police reports. And if they come in after hours, we usually just have an officer respond back to the station to get it for them.
So that would, basically what you're saying is that would be handled remotely initially? That from the dispatch?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Say that again.
That would be a call, like a request for information like that would be handled through the dispatch center initially and then forwarded back to an officer or an individual that could follow up with.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Yep.
Russ, to follow up on that too, like we have a records woman right now working during the daytime. The window would be open on that side for her 18 hours or hopefully the 28 once we're done with our budget next year. But the thing is too, is that the phone, all of our business calls go into dispatch. If it's a public records request into the Westcom, they know that Officer Arduini is our lead public records information. They would just transfer that call to his voicemail. He then returns the call to those people. And the paperwork can be done. We're doing a lot of scanning this stuff and just emailing it directly to the people. We were concerned about our senior citizens. We're discussing it today with Roger. Like he said, a lot of the seniors are not into the email. Those, to save the people trip that could be even emailed to them at that point in time. But I guess the hardest thing I've had to wrap my head around is everything that our dispatch center has done, like business calls and stuff, is just being done at a different location. But we are losing that human aspect of having somebody when someone does walk into that, into that lobby.
But with that said, we did know when we've gone through this, we've recognized that that's an area we have to address. So while financially this might look, extremely attractive, there's going to be some backfill that's going to have to happen here to continue to operate, whether it be increasing hours of records, a person in between there, or something along those lines. We do know that is something that will need to be addressed. But again,
Right, that is also my position too, that we would make sure we identify all those areas we need to address, and we just list those functions and activities out and how we're going to address them, and that becomes like an offset so that when we're done with all of this, the calculation has to net that out.
correct.
Could somebody clarify for me who currently is signed on to the Westcom arrangement?
We currently have Chicopee, Longmeadow, Munson, and East Longmeadow.
Okay, and to follow that up, I think one of our members pointed out this weekend that they saw an article in the Republican newspaper that one of those communities was withdrawing from the agreement or was not going to participate.
Hampton.
That was Hamden. Okay.
Not in it.
Yeah, Hamden made the decision that, because they're still a single dispatch, and instead of coming to us, they were going to regionalize with another town.
Okay.
I heard grants for like more or less the first, I'm missing a glaze over it, so what I'm saying probably isn't correct. So the first 3 years or so, there's grants involved. So year 5, and hypothetically, are we looking at 200 grand or maybe only 125,000 that year? You know what I mean?
No, year five would be your 100,000.
Are we
Or
allowed?
actually, it would actually only be 75,000. Year 6 is when you would pay the full 100,000.
Okay, so year 7 to 10, is there a 10% bump or, I mean, are you thinking it's
You'd
still?
have to expect some kind of bump at that point. I mean,
And
we're
I
gonna
do.
get,
I do. I don't expect it to be the same, but there's no real,
Yeah.
you can't really put a number on that, correct?
No, but it's going to be your natural cost of living bump that is going to happen with any dispatch center that you're using.
Understood.
was
So
the-
you're thinking 3% or something like that.
Right.
2%.
What was the percentage of your budget that's being covered by the state today?
75% of our operating budget.
I think that's what worried me.
So, well, so if that happens, then so your 100,000 is 25%. Because we're about 10, we would be about 10% of the operating budget, but if they lose 75% of their funds, say the state decides that, okay, we've done enough to get everybody regionalized and you're regionalized and the state money starts to ramp down, you have the capability of roughly to 3 to 4x that 100,000. But you'd have to
Yes,
net,
but-
you'd have to net that against your current cost. And I think one of the things I know Chief Anderson and I have had a couple of conversations about it, and I believe Chief Bishop and I as well, is, you know, the cost savings of the transition are important, especially because there's significant costs involved in the transition, but there's also cost avoidance around, you know,
Radios.
significant structural costs that are coming forth for dispatch, and also the increasing burden being placed on dispatch today with a single seat, right? The EMD load and the call volume load and so on and so forth. So I think, you know, just from my frame of mind right now is to look at it as, I don't know that it's going to be a huge cost driver, you know, several years out. It's going to be the ability to provide the service at a reasonable cost several years out, because our costs go off the rails when we start having more than one dispatcher on and with the load, plus the costs that are coming for, say, replacement of the radio system and so on and so forth, and the dispatch console and all those things those bills are coming due, right? So the timing of this is prescient. Well,
Right, Chief, police and fire chiefs, what's the estimated cost of the needed radio and console upgrade estimates that you've been getting from your research?
Total is about 1 million to 1.5 million, somewhere in there, for a complete system upgrade. One
All
thing
right.
I wanted to go back on with Doug too, and that's when one of the talks in regards to, well, what happens if the 911 money goes away? All this grant money disappears. And obviously with what we've just been through in this last year, nobody knows. But I will say, I did talk to the director of 911, and he did say that, you know, keep in mind that the money is coming from cell phones, and that is an act of legislation that put that there. So to take that away, it would take another act of legislation, which would be quite a monumental task. So the regards to why there's obviously no guarantee there, it is a tough act to try to take that, whatever it is, 50, 75 cents a cell phone call that goes to 911 now, and change the need of, or the use for that. So I think we need to keep that in the back of our mind too.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask Aaron, I remember doing the tour with you and getting the presentation. In terms of the money that comes into your budget, is that all state general fund money, or is that also some of that cell phone surcharge revenue?
That 75% from our operating budget is all cell phone surcharge. That's where
Okay.
coming from.
All right, so that's not dependent upon other revenue streams like this, the status of the state budget on a down year or something affecting it.
Not at all, no.
Aaron, my name is
Yeah.
Mark Siegel, one of the communications officers for the police department. And my question is, we have very aging VHF system that you guys were talking about possibly hooking in via microwave link to make your connection. Once that connection is made, what happens after that as far as upgrades and or maintaining? Currently, most of our receivers are on telephone poles around town and are actually doing their transmissions with phone lines that have become decrepit more and more, and we've had issues with them. Currently, we only have one microwave link, and you guys are transmitting, or majority of your communications are UHF, which is totally different bandwidth. What happens with that? We currently have been purchasing new VHF equipment. You know, what direction will that go? I know you have to do a study, but that's totally different side of the spectrum.
So we would have our radio vendor come out and do a study for you, but we'd like you to get up on the UHF system, and we think it would be cheaper for us to expand it out instead of refurbishing your VHF system. Initially, if you're not ready to come up on the UHF system, when you actually join the cutover date, we would actually just connect your VHF system and maintain it until you're ready to come up on UHF.
Can you turn it down a little?
So, but
Down a little?
How would they connect that? Because currently we're using telephone poles and telephone lines. We don't have any premium sites except for the T1 connection you guys would connect to.
So we could connect our fiber right into your station, into your console, and connect it that way. And like I said, that's just a temporary solution until the new radio system, until we build out your system.
Mr. Chairman, I got a question for the two chiefs, Anderson and Bishop. It's kind of hypothetical and maybe premature, but I understand that as part of this process, our current system would be analyzed and evaluated comprehensively. But in terms of going forward, if we decided to become part of Westcom or some other group arrangement, I'm sure there will be some sort of analysis if there was some sort of catastrophic failure at the dispatch center, and that local municipalities would then have to respond in a different way. Are there going to be resources that are going to have to be retained at some level, even locally, even after we have a new system in place? Again, I can tell
you that in other towns, other districts, not under Westcom, that they kept their VHF system for a couple reasons. They utilized it for just that reason. Somehow the cord gets cut, they have something. The other thing they're using it for is their DPWs, and jump on it if they need to. So, those are, while there's a way of band-aiding it to keep it going, there is a use for both in the long run, I believe.
Okay. The thing too, maybe stretching a little bit further, Art, is that like right now, besides the 911 part of it, just the phones right now, if ours went down, I believe in the dispatch, can correct me, it automatically falls over to Southampton. With Westcom, we found out the other day, if the 911 goes down in Westcom, it transfers right over to Holyoke, and Holyoke becomes our backup person at that point in time. I think possibly, I'm not a real tech guy like Officer Siegel, even Aaron here, but I would think that if our radio system went down, because we are sharing other, radio system with other communities, I don't know if somehow that could be a benefit, Aaron, if you can back it up, that somehow we could get onto their frequencies if ours happened to go down in the Southwick, area. Today, especially with voice over internet and fiber and that stuff, I just think it'd be a lot more. I think we'd actually probably have better protection if we lost our regular radios right now, we wouldn't have much. But Aaron, if you can, I'm not sure if that's right or not, but just thinking about it.
Yeah, so one of the things with the network that we built, if you lose one site, it defaults to different sites. It's a trunk network. And it will work.
I'm sorry, Aaron, I'm having a little trouble hearing you.
It would, our system will work locally even if we go offline. So it's a trunked system, and if our sites go down, your sites still remain, and it just takes a different pathway. So your console at your station would still be able to pick up the channels, and you could still have it locally. You just wouldn't have the distance that you have when you're part of the whole network.
All right, thank you.
So, Aaron, I'm sorry, Arthur, were you through?
Yes.
So, Aaron, so operationally, when this comes live, and if we were to engage Westcom, so to your average officer sitting out in their car, or fire personnel, are they going to hear all of the radio traffic from all the other member communities while they're sitting in their car, or would it be more trunked, like you said, and they just hear the Southwick traffic that they hear today?
So right now, the way we're working it is Chicopee and Longmeadow are both on the new network, and they each have their own channels, but they can hear the others if they want to. So they can scan it. It's on the same frequency band, and the network reaches, so they would be able to put it on and listen to them. We also have backup channels that different departments will use. Like if they're going to serve a warrant, we put them on a different channel so they're not in with the general traffic. And that's a shared channel that we can either put Chicopee or Longmeadow on, or both of them if they needed to work something together.
Understood. Thank you.
So off of Doug's question there too, though, Aaron, just to verify, they happen to have their own channel. Does East Longmeadow, and we have our own channel, or are they shared channels?
Right now, all of our towns are on separate channels. Our goal is to start regionalizing some of the channels because it does, it reduces the resources on our end. If we have two communities sharing a channel, then it's just one dispatcher that has to pay attention to that channel. Where if they're on different channels, now you're supplying two dispatchers to listen to two separate channels. So some of the smaller towns will be put on the same channel and share it.
So would that eventually become more logical, as if this geographically fills in, that
Yes.
geographically,
Yep.
you know, it would make sense to have two closer communities on the same channel, correct?
That's correct. We would try and put communities that mutual aid each other. We would want them on the shared channel. And like I said, I came from the state police in New Braintree, and we had 7 different departments on one channel, and it works. You get used to it. It's shocking at first. When we first did it, there was a lot of they didn't like it at first, but because they mutual aid each other so much, they eventually were actually kind of liking it because they could just start sliding over in that direction when they heard a hot call go out.
Aaron, kind of on the same subject, if let's just say that Southwick had a priority call, a large scale event, we're close to Bradley, let's just say a plane came down, would you be able to just sequester that frequency and just make it committed and then move somebody someplace else? And the same would happen for us if we were on a shared frequency, get moved off and then just move to a different frequency so that radio traffic would stay open for that frequency.
Yes, that's how we work it now. We have we have 2 shared channels for 3 shared channels for police and 3 shared channels for fire. So if we get something big that's happening on one of the channels, we just move everybody else to the other channels. And then we also move a dispatcher to handle that big scene by themselves, so they're not paying attention to anything else when they're doing that.
Aaron, just one thing too is you have it separated from a call receiver versus the dispatcher, correct? So one person's receiving the 911 call and doing EMD. Somebody else is actually dispatching whoever, right?
That's correct. We do separate the room so that we have call takers that are answering the 911, focusing on the EMD. They put it into the CAD, and then the dispatcher can either pick up and listen to the call while the call taker's answering it and get the information, or they can read it off the screen in the CAD and send it out.
Aaron, can I ask a question on personnel? What happens to the highly trained professional dispatchers that we have sitting there right now if this becomes an option for the town?
Well, we hope they're going to apply for any openings that we have.
Bob, I think you're muted.
Aaron?
I was talking to my dog,
Yeah.
actually.
Okay.
Hi, Aaron. This is Peter Coe from the Southwick Dispatch Center. I also have some similar questions in reference to staffing. Currently, does your center have the amount of personnel that they would need to take on this new account? Or would they need people if Southwick was to actually sign on?
We would be looking to add 5 positions if Southwick decides to sign on. So there would be plenty of openings for the personnel that are currently working in Southwick.
Okay. My next question after that would be related to that subject, which is in reference to what type of employer are you? Are you a state employer? Are you a private employer? Are you part of Hampden County Retirement?
So we are a special district in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So we are part of Hampden County Retirement. We're our own municipality.
All right. And how many other communities are you canvassing at this time besides Southwick for potential sign-on?
Right now we are only in conversations with one other town besides Southwick. The state 911 department has given us 17 towns to present to, but I'm sure that we won't end up that large.
Okay.
Aaron, this is Linda Bathel. Can you tell me how long the recordings are maintained?
911 recordings are required to be maintained for 1 year.
Okay, and if we decided to sign on with you and then for whatever reason figured we wanted to go back to what we have right now, is there any type of a penalty to that? And with all the equipment that's being upgraded at your facility that is paid for by the state, would you maintain the equipment that you gained to service our community? Or would that then default to us since you gained it under our contract?
So with Westcom, there is no penalty from us if you choose to opt out after you've joined. The state 911 grant department, however, is asking that you pay back any grant funding that you received through Westcom's applications. And then as far as the equipment gets awarded to us during the upgrade, so we would be keeping and maintaining the equipment.
Aaron, I read where the first initial contract is 5 years. Are we talking about less than 5 years where you'd have to pay back the grant? Or are we talking about after the 5 years and let's say we didn't renew not the grant, but we didn't renew the contract?
So I would have to check with state 911 because this is their wording, but I believe if you leave the regional after you received money, that you would be responsible to pay that money back.
At whatever time we left, you're saying.
Right, and that's the language in the grant.
So I'm sorry, it's Linda again. So you would maintain the equipment. We'd basically be paying the state back for that equipment. Can we apply to the 911 grant to get our own equipment after that?
I would imagine you could apply, yes. But that would definitely be a question for state 911.
Okay.
Linda, just keep in mind now that as far as I know, 911, we can't get equipment. We only get education or training and some reimbursement for hours. Kevin could correct that, but we currently cannot get anything for equipment.
Okay, thanks, Russ.
further questions for Aaron?
Aaron, just to clarify, a follow-up on the personnel question, our dispatchers aren't guaranteed a position there. They would have to apply as a new employee. And secondly, would they carry over any seniority that they have here in Southwick, or would they start at zero if they were hired?
So unfortunately, we can't guarantee a position because as we take on each town, we don't know how many openings it's going to create, and they do not get any seniority when they come over. They're a new employee for us.
Does their Hampden County carry over if they were here for X amount of years?
Their retirement does carry, but their seniority does not.
Okay.
And how long has Westcom been up and running?
We opened with Chicopee August of last year. We took Long Meadow in December. We added Munson and East Long Meadow in June.
So your longest term employee is under 2 years.
Correct.
Okay.
It's Linda again. I have one more follow-up. Did I hear you right, Aaron, that you would not be adding any new clients during 2021?
We don't think we're going to be able to until we get the reconstruction done and we move to Salter. The location that we're at now is just too small to add anyone to it. So once we get into the new building, which we expect to be December of this year.
Okay, and then at that time, even if say a month from now, we said, yeah, sign us up, we wouldn't start the process technically till either December 2021 or after.
No, actually, if you showed interest, we would start the project right away. The next development grant application is due March 4th of this year. So if we wanted to get you in December, we'd want to use this application for the funding for the radio infrastructure and the network connections.
Okay, thanks.
Aaron, have you experienced any delays with respect to calls? I mean, has there been any comments from the people you service presently relative to, you know, some more delays versus their own in-house dispatch?
We did in the beginning have some complaints of that, and we identified the fact that because the dispatchers are taking live calls now, that the times of the calls were more accurate and there really wasn't any delay. It's just that when you had one person in there, they would answer the call and send it out over the radio and then create it in the CAD. So it looked like it was coming in and being dispatched at the exact same time. Where when we have call takers and dispatchers, the call taker is still on the phone with the client and they're sending it out. The dispatchers are sending it out. So there's very little delay in that aspect, but the time of the call you'll see is earlier than what it would have been documented at when the single dispatcher was in there.
Okay, thanks. Can you just refresh or go over again the backup that you have for Westcom? You know, how does that fall back if we now have different equipment or you have different equipment? How does that fall back to our dispatch? Because unless I misunderstood.
So our backup, our redundancy is through, we connect each town through fiber and through a microwave link. So if one system goes down, if the microwave goes out and for some reason loses power, all the information, the radio, the network, the IMC connection goes through the fiber. If the fiber goes down, everything goes over the microwave.
Okay.
But Westcom, I mean, despite the redundancies, Westcom itself is a single point of failure for dispatch for those communities, correct? If Westcom
That is
somehow
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that is correct. But we also maintain a radio console in each community so that if we absolutely crash, then we can always send somebody there to handle that community's calls.
Bob, does that address your question?
Yeah, it's pretty much. On another note, would with our own emergency management be able to provide any backup to fire and police? I mean, if it really hit the fan.
We've used Long Meadow's emergency management department during large storms when we needed. We've staffed 12 people during storms, but we didn't have enough computers or radios. So their emergency management opened up their operations center and was able to allow some of our dispatchers to go and work out of that to handle the extra call volume.
But that meant that their emergency management equipment was synergistic with yours, correct?
Correct.
All right, and I don't think that would be the case with our emergency management, or would it?
I would think they would update.
I think when she's citing Long Meadow, Kevin, didn't Long Meadow just go through a radio upgrade before they joined?
Yes, they did.
Yeah, they did.
So that's why I'm sure their emergency management was already synchronized or consistent with the rest of the public safety departments in the community. So that would have to be examined in ours by having the Westcom radio analysis or the field techs come out and examine every piece of equipment.
Yeah, I mean, technically right now they do that. They could talk on our frequencies. So with the addition of a radio, I think their operations center could be up and running pretty simple.
Aaron, with the expansion of the radios and the work that Westcom would do with the radios, is it safe to say that anything that really falls on, the backup systems, specifically any of our emergency responses, would all be included in that system? So we're not talking just a system for fire, just a system for PD. We're talking, in the event that we had to have an emergency dispatch center here, we do have that capability now, and then it's expanded during, natural emergencies and things of that nature. That would be inclusive as well.
Yes, that's correct. We'd make sure that everything was available and up and running.
Aaron, do the towns get to pick what radios they're able to get through your vendor or what have you?
We are trying to keep everyone on the same portable radios and mobile radios. We're using Kenwoods right now. They're a better model, but not as expensive as Motorola. And we do want everybody to have the same ones because it's just easier for our radio maintenance to work on them if it's all the same.
Now, say if your vendor takes over, as far as servicing our equipment, which is majority of Motorola, are they able to service Motorola? Or is that something we would have to maintain a separate vendor? Because if I'm not mistaken, you guys are using Marcus Communications?
No, we're actually using a company called Horizon out of Arizona. And we have our own in-house radio IT person that also does maintenance. So we would be able to maintain the Motorola equipment for as long as possible until it was replaced.
It's Linda again. I thought I read somewhere that you had 2 full-time technology people there for the equipment. Is it less than 2? And then also if we need that, is that at an additional fee for us?
So we do have 2 full-time people for IT. One is a radio specialist and the other one backs him up in that position. And no, it does not cost you anything when they have to go out to one of our towns to service the radios.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, one quick question.
Mr. Fox.
As I understand it, to enter into a letter of intent, it just takes a simple vote of the Board of Selectmen?
That's correct.
So if we were to decide to go in this, and because of the grant funding, you'd have to apply for that in March, that would necessitate us making a decision within the next few weeks. Is that correct?
Yes, that would be the best process to do it. Is, if we could get an answer maybe before February 3rd, That would give us 4 weeks to finish the application and get quotes.
Mr. Steinhardt, does this necessitate in any way of having a vote at a town meeting?
Well, when I read the laws, I think that legislative thing, it seemed to be confusing because it just said a vote of the Board of Selectmen. So what we would probably do is have town council examine that for you and inform you of what that means. Because unless Aaron tells me that Long Meadow had to have a town meeting vote or East Long Meadow, who both joined, Long Meadow's a town, so theirs would have had to have been, East Long Meadow's a city, actually. Long Meadow's a town, so we'd have to figure out how they voted it, and we'd have to have council look at the law that we gave you in the regional agreement that came out of Long Meadow in that other group that Russ Anderson and Chief Riccardi and I used to be part of, because I was on the committee that developed that regional agreement language originally.
So one thing to keep in mind also with that is that because we are a municipality, you are entering into an intermunicipal agreement, which does not have to go to a town vote.
Seems like that could be resolved with a call to council to just to double, triple check, right?
Yep, we have the copies of the laws.
Yeah.
The contract regional agreement references all the statutes and the laws, and I believe I gave you those in your packets.
Yep. And some of this is along the lines of, as Aaron's alluding to, maybe not dissimilar to some of the stuff that we have with the regional school district, correct? In the same
Correct.
type of intergovernmental deal.
Yeah, and the
That's
board,
correct.
Mr. Chairman, your board has entered into IMA agreement with Suffield and with Westfield and Agawam and so forth under those laws,
Right.
under other similar laws that permit it.
If I remember right, Aaron, too, Munson joined in a really aggressive nature. Wasn't it a couple months, 3 months or something?
Right, they came in under 3 months, under 90 days.
I mean, this is something this is Doug Moglen. I mean, I think this is something that we can decide if it's something we want to, in fairly short order, decide if the general idea is a good one, and then work towards, if it is something that we want to proceed with after consulting with the chiefs and everyone else, all the stakeholders involved here. And then, kind of then, because of their own built-in delay of not being able to take us in until, the end of the year at the earliest, would give us time to do a lot of things right. And we wouldn't have to rush the process. And hopefully we could avoid some of the bumps if it's something that we want to do.
I know we have our opinion from both of our chiefs, but last I knew, both of those guys have 1 foot out the door. So Richard, any thoughts? Mr. Landis, any thoughts of what you see, good or bad? I mean, I always wondered how one poor dispatcher handled everything anyways. I'm dumbfounded when I watch those guys work half the time because they do a hell of a job with nothing.
Well, thank you. There certainly is, there's a change, if you would, just in emergency services in general. One of them is a migration towards regionalization for many reasons. I have several friends that have worked and work in several of the communities that Westcom is servicing right now. And like anything, the transition was a little rough. There were a couple of bumps, but once they righted the ship, everybody has found that it has been to the advantage of the community as well as the people that work within the system. Financially, if it saves us some money, fantastic. But in order to meet the demand of services of having a call taker, a dispatcher that's capable of doing EMD accurately and effectively with a good outcome, that starts to add to the cost. So I think long-term, if we're looking 5-10 years from now, I think Westcom is a good solution. And if not Westcom, somebody else regionally. But right now, Westcom, they're the ones that are at the table, and the product is very good. I know there are a lot of technical questions that still need to be resolved, and all of that stuff would work out. I'll share one story with a very good friend of mine from high school who works for the town of Long Meadow. And he did say in the beginning that they were afraid that it was going to kind of rob some of their autonomy within their town. And he said, remarkably, that hasn't happened. in fact, the professionalism that the services delivered from Westcom really made a difference and was convincing for some people to get on board and say this was the right decision. This is the way to move. And so moving forward, Longmeadow had other radio challenges as well too, some of them similar to ours, but we're faced with kind of a double situation where we do have an aging system, an aging console, all of which needs to be replaced. And without, you can do it now or you can do it in 5 years, but either way, we're going to have to pay. And it's going to be very expensive in the long run to replace just the infrastructure itself. As Officer Siegel had alluded to, right now the system we're using is relying on some outdated copper systems which need to be improved. So I think moving ahead and going into the 21st century full steam is the right move.
Thank you.
You're right, Richard. I mean, we're going to be spending anywhere to $1 million to $1.5 million just on capital equipment in the future. And if you spread that out over a 10-year or 15-year note, you're going to be at 100 to 130, 150,000 a year just in those capital costs. That's not to say that when we're done doing this audit of the equipment, that there's going to be stuff that the Westcom would provide through this funding mechanism in this opportunity versus stuff we're still going to be responsible for buying locally.
Right.
Everybody to understand that. This is not one of those things where it's all or nothing. There's still going to be issues that both police and fire chiefs are going to identify that we're going to have to be responsible for equipment at the local government level.
Right.
Chief Landis?
Thank you, Mr. Didi. So pretty much the deputy chief covered it quite well. One of the things that we're kind of at a crossroads with is just the size of our dispatch and their ability to handle the growing call volume. We've been approached with some ideas to look at, such as having another dispatcher during peak hours. So there's two inside the building. So, there's obviously a cost associated with that, because there are times when with the call volume that they get, that's, one body isn't quite enough. So we have to look at that. That's certainly something that if we don't make changes at this point, we're going to have to down the road. The building itself, or the room, I should say, is deteriorating. So that's going to need a total upgrade. There's a cost associated with that, and certainly everything shouldn't be a cost factor. The dark station can be scary for some, just the concept of it. But I think we found with the COVID, we've been very flexible because we pretty much our lobby has been dark, but we've accommodated the public through our social networking, or whether it be just meeting them outside or more, going to the home, whatever it takes. So I think it's like with any piece of technology as well is just getting used to it. Some of the officers have concerns, and maybe Aaron, you can touch on this, what you've seen as far as their responsibilities in the car, making a motor vehicle stop. What type of information will they be doing more than what they normally would do, such as filling call cards that you've been seeing or hearing from the street?
So one of the changes that one of the departments had to go through was the call narrative. Our dispatcher takes the call and they put in a short little paragraph of what's going on. But then once the officer makes contact, instead of calling in what happened at the scene, we ask the officer to document it in the call. It just reduces the radio traffic. And also from a legal standpoint, they're the ones that were there. They're the ones that should be documenting what happened instead of calling it into a dispatcher who will then translate it into their own words. So that's one of the few things that was a change for one of the departments. As far as motor vehicle stops, they can call it in like they normally do. The dispatcher will create the call screen, will run all the information for them, will read it back to them. Some of the younger officers like to run their own stops, and that's also, they create the screen and they just call over the radio and say, I'm on a stop, I have already created it, and we just monitor the screen. So it works both ways.
And how would you answer to some who feel that having a dispatcher locally who's more familiar with the community can better direct the officer to the call?
So our dispatchers become familiar with the communities rather quickly, and just as if you hired somebody new to your dispatch center, they're not out driving the community. They're learning it by every call they take. They might not live in your community. They might not know anything about it. But as soon as they take a call, they're looking at the address, they're mapping it. They get familiar with the landmarks rather quickly. It's the boots on the ground that are the ones that are out in the community, and they're the ones that can assist the dispatcher whenever needed with a particular landmark. But we do also ask them when we take on a new community, we ask all of our dispatchers to go out and do a ride along with an officer and on the fire department so that they can get familiar with it as well.
And so currently, like pretty much all the departments that you're dealing with are running with IMC or Square One, who I believe they are now. And if that is to go away, if they decide not to carry that service anymore, or even until that point, changes in software, updating of certain things, how is that handled?
So your IMC would be connected to ours, so you would actually have access to all 5 towns and their history with people. And we pay for all the maintenance and the upgrade. And if they no longer carry the product and we have to go to a new system, we would pay for that upgrade as well.
Does that IMC transfer out of Southwick into a central data center, or is it maintained and linked?
It does.
So
it does. It transfers into our system so that you would still have all of your history, but you would get all of the other towns' history as well.
So if we were to make this move while you were rebuilding, would you, because I know when we spoke in the beginning, there would have been a process for you to take all our history so the dispatchers could look up a particular address and see we've been there, whether it be warnings for dangerous individuals, weapons, whatnot. At the time, you said it took about a year for all that information. Right. But if we were to start this process, commit early by this February, March timeline, would you be able to begin that process so as we came online, we wouldn't have that downtime?
So that is something that is paid for through the development grant. So we would have to wait until it was awarded through the development grant to issue the purchase order for that transition. But we would start that right away.
Okay, thank you.
Would you have a follow-up question? Oh, go ahead, Bob.
Chief, would this change in any way your dash cam or body cam storage? I mean, is that, I don't know how that works. Is that a separate thing from dispatch?
I guess we'd have to cross that bridge when we get to them because we don't have either one of those yet, Bob. But if we do, I'm assuming, I don't know, Aaron, would it be kept at our place or your place? Do you get any big body cams or dash at all?
I would think that would be kept locally at your place. I don't think that's something that we would be tapping into unless it's something you asked us to monitor, then we would.
I had looked at actually that, Bob, and it would be something that the data would probably be stored here.
Okay.
And right now, with the police reform bill that just came out, there is going to be another committee of committees that are going to be looking at these body cams, because right now some of the departments, the unions have concerns with how they're going to be deployed. And so some places there's a few hurdles, but I think the legislation might dictate otherwise. So we're kind of waiting to see how that happens before we go expending any monies and when they're going to kind of recreate the wheel, I think.
Aaron, I do have hopefully a last question. You did say, I didn't realize that the time frame was so close right now. And that concerns me for the pressure that'll be on our Board of Selectmen and our Finance Committee. But if we do this letter of intent and we get into it 2-3 months down the road and we realize that this is just not, for us, how bad does that hurt you? I mean, I know you're going to put a grant together. If they awarded the grant, could the money be returned without any penalties to us? Just trying to see if there is any type of escape route that I didn't realize we had like a 3 or 4 week, window.
So as long as we haven't spent any of the money and we've just issued the purchase orders, we can just cancel them and the money goes back to state 911 and it's not a problem.
Because by the time you do the grant, I know, I've taken it, sometimes it can take them a month and a half, 2 months to give the approval, for the grant. So really besides that, excuse me, we could have like another 2 or 3 month window where we could back out with any penalties or repercussions for us.
That's correct.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you very, very much. Unless there's any other question, I think we're going to try to move our meeting along. I'm certain that we're going to be discussing this more. We'll probably even have a work session on it in the next week or so to try to put together a list of concerns and thoughts and get together with the finance committee and try to figure out what's going to be our strategy here. So Aaron, I want to thank you for coming in tonight and making a presentation and answering all of our questions. It was very informative. Thank you very much. And
Thank you.
Thank you
Have a good night.
Thank you to everyone else who asked some very smart and intelligent, informing questions.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. Okay, so let's try to get back to the agenda and get through the last few items on this list because we do have an executive session at 6:15, I believe, and it's almost 6:15 now. I need a motion to authorize the chair to sign the gasoline and diesel fiscal year 22 contracts.
Joe Didi will make that motion.
Russ Fox will second.
Doug Moglen, aye.
Joe Didi, aye.
Russ Fox, aye.
And I need a motion to authorize the chair to sign the IAFF Local 4919 Memorandum of Understanding on process to fill vacant shifts.
Oh, Joe Didi will make that motion.
Russ Fox will second.
Doug Moglen, aye.
Joe Didi, aye.
Russ Fox, aye.
Carl, we should hold over the select board legislation request to Mass General Court Legislature till next week. After you unmute yourself, sir. Carl, you're muted.
I think he said yes, so take a cream and sugar.
You can hold it over till the 25th. Next week's a holiday. That's fine. We can hold it.
Next week's a holiday. Fantastic. Okay. Other new business this week? Carl?
You have in your folder a invoice number 9 from the PVPC for $5,698.91 that you should be approving.
Joe Didi will make that motion.
Thank
Russ Fox will
you.
second.
Doug Moglen, aye.
Joe Didi, aye. Joe Didi, aye.
Russ, you want to vote on that one or?
Russ Fox, aye.
Gotcha. Okay. Anything else, Mr. Steinhardt?
Yes, and then of course we have.
I'm on the wrong agenda. That's why I'm falling behind. No, it's the same.
Yeah, no, it's the same. And then of course we had a recommendation by the DPW director. We have a retirement coming up for Mike Bryant from DPW. So obviously Randy has submitted to us for the DPW to do the external posting. They obviously will go through the internal posting requirements under the collective bargaining agreement. At the end of the day, they will have a net new vacancy that they need to replace. And of course, we have to do this because we need people in the trucks to plow. So will the board accept the resignation and support the recruitment of that new position?
No, it'd be an internal or external posting.
It starts, well, there'll be internal postings, but we still do an external posting because we have to have a heavy equipment come in at the end of it.
Okay, so I need that motion, please.
Right, and again, this is to fill a vacancy, okay? It's not a new dollars, it's to fill a
Correct.
vacancy.
Mr. Chairman, could we have a little clarification first? Are we
Certainly.
making one motion to accept the retirement or resignation first?
Correct. Please.
Joe Didi will make that motion.
Russ Fox will second.
Doug Moglen, aye.
Joe Didi, aye.
Russ Fox, aye.
Okay.
Okay. Now we need a motion to post.
Could we have discussion?
Yes.
Absolutely.
All right. I'm just throwing this out here. I know it's tight, it's wintertime, things like that. But in the hiring process, I know that some other communities, not every community, put together a group of people, sometimes invite somebody in from another community to make sure that any hires actually know, they might have a license, but do they actually know how to use the piece of equipment? So I know it's done in other.
saying?
I
What are you
know it's done in other communities. I'm just throwing it out there.
No one asking you if you know how to cut a goddamn flower, do they? Now you expect the guy to drive the piece of equipment that's on his license? Holy shit. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think a selectman should take the guy out with the license and see if either of the two idiots can dig a goddamn hole. That's what I think. But anyways, on the inside, that's wild. You think people actually have licenses that can't do their job and are town employees?
Oh, I think we've seen that. Before the town employee part, I mean, you can have people that are.
Oh, absolutely. I'm one of them. I had a CDL for years. I can't drive a goddamn truck, but I got a license. Yep.
I'm just throwing it out there, Mr. Chairman.
I have no opposition. I guess we'd have to figure out how that would work. We are the personnel board. I mean, that is within our purview, I believe, right? So certainly we should have that discussion. Do you have
the important thing you want to do is recruit. You want to recruit and do the posting so that you can get to the point where you've got a pool of candidates to go do that other process.
And the chief is taking photos while we're screwing around. Okay. Okay. So I need a motion to post and then we'll get to the interview process and on a go forward basis. I have no objection to it. I don't think there's anything. I mean, other things we have tests for, right? I mean, we make the medics and firemen go through and take a test, right? Not just with their certification, they have to do a test, right? To join our department, do all this
like
other
an
stuff.
assessment center.
I have no objection. I really don't, because it would be embarrassing to hire somebody to operate a piece of equipment and they get on the equipment and
that's fine. So why don't you designate a board member to sit in on the interviews and conduct that assessment?
Which of you gentlemen want to take that bullet?
Oh, I'm easy. I'll tell somebody how it is real quickly. That's not a problem. But Russ, if you're up for it, and even rose petals are your thing, so whatever you want, Russ.
I would be more than happy to have the vice chairman with his vast knowledge of heavy equipment handle that.
Doug Moglen, aye.
Russ
Joe
Fox,
Didi,
aye.
Joe Didi, aye. And you're right, Russ, though. They should, let's face it. We all start at the transfer station. It's a wonderful thing. But within a year or two lately, these guys are moving right up. And some of them do have the credentials. And we don't know. We're not the old DPW that actually did manholes and built roads back when it was those, the gentlemen have all passed on now. But those guys we didn't have a Crestview in our back pocket to do stuff. We did it. We did it. So you're right. Those days are gone.
In all seriousness now.
Yeah.
The taxpayers of the town of Southwick have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in pieces of equipment. Yeah. And we should make sure that people that are utilizing that equipment, even though they have a license, that are experienced and can actually utilize that equipment safely, and also make sure that the investment the taxpayers made is protected.
You're 100% right.
You're absolutely right.
100% right.
Okay, and then one more thing, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, please, Carl.
Well, obviously tonight you had this meeting to go over and evaluate this process. So I sensed at the earlier part of the discussion, you do want me to have town council to double check what the process would be to vote and sign such an agreement for this regional dispatch.
I would, only because the director alluded to a legislative process
Right,
which
but my,
it,
but
by
my.
and of
law-
its nature, you're right.
and
I need
my-
to understand what that is because, right. And it just makes, and it's
my
common
laws-
sense. Yes.
That's
And because it just makes sense because we wouldn't want to go down a path and then find out, oh yeah, we do need to go to town meeting.
Right, because 2 of the 4 entities are cities in the entity, so we just need to make sure that our board can make an equivalent decision for this.
Correct.
It's not, remember, it's not the planning committee's part anymore, it's the actual then allowing us to join from another community. So I have the package here, so we can certainly send that to Benjamin. Any reservations with what I'm gonna do?
None. I mean, this is just my opinion, and I think I've heard it from the chiefs, and I'd love to hear their continued opinion because I respect it and value it highly. But the writing's been on the wall from the state for some time. That this is the way you're going to go, and they're going to do it by carrot and stick, and eventually by fiat. And I don't want to be at the point where they do it by fiat, and because then there's no money. Right now, it's going to be advantageous. We might get a new radio system out of the deal. We're going to help us move in. It's going to defray the cost. But and I remember from the last one when you and the previous police chief and Chief Anderson were involved, there was 0 cost savings. It was actually going to be net, probably a little more expensive for a while. And you don't look at this as a cost savings because eventually they're going to eventually tell you that, oh, we're not giving you the 911 equipment anymore. Oh, we're not going to do this anymore. Oh, we're not going to. And so your costs escalate to where you can't do it anymore. And the burden of EMD and the number of calls we're getting is going to put us into the stratosphere, plus the consoles and everything else. I think the rest of it can all be worked out. And we want to, and we're at it. And lastly, we're at a crossroads staffing wise. There's an opportunity for the dispatchers that want to continue in this new role in an organization that's only 2 years old. So even if you are the juniorest employee, the most senior employees got 2 years on you. And then secondly, there's a bunch of our dispatchers that they're at the end of their career and they may or may not want to continue in a new role, or and it's going to be what it is. So as far as other dispatchers learning our town and how it's going to work, I think this is the timing is about right.
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
because of the fact that we have a state holiday, we will not be meeting next Monday. So, and if we were to try to get some sort of answer to them by that February 3rd, I would like to suggest that we get written input from our police department, fire department, and some sort of written information from our finance committee by our next meeting.
Well, I can imagine, Russ, if we had to go into the meeting after on the 8th and submit it after, that'd still be fine too.
But I think, Carl, that we should move on this thing. I don't think we need to procrastinate. We're going into the budget season. You know, we're going to be meeting and going over budget numbers. I think we need to move on this and move on it quickly.
Yep. Well, I will be sending this other stuff to the town attorney to review and get you your other answers.
Great. Okay.
Okay.
Other new business, Joe?
No, I'm gonna wait.
Mr. Fox?
No, sir.
Old business, Chief, you did speak to the gentleman on about Iron Horse Lane.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We confirmed that it is Iron Horse Hill that they requested. We found the emails and verified that is what they requested.
Okay. That's probably
so-
why he
so
didn't call me back.
Oh, Kevin, it's Iron Horse Hill?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. And then lastly on the, is there anything left to do on the Southwick Police Department lieutenant recruitment process?
Mr. Chairman, you have a series of documents I sent you with the edits for you to finish, and you already have the authorization outside of the meeting to conclude that process and instruct us accordingly.
Very well. At this point, we are going to go into executive session, correct? Is there
Yes.
any other business before the board before we do that?
Nope.
Okay. So a motion to go into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21, 2 and 3, Chapter 214, Section 1B, and CMR 20031B, Labor Council, Collective Bargaining, Police, DPW, Dispatch, Clerk, and Library units. And regarding the police, DPW, clerk, dispatch unions, department heads, and non-union staff, move to go into executive session to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel and not reconvene an open session. Move to go into executive session to conduct collective bargaining sessions with non-union personnel and not reconvene an open session. Move to go into executive session to conduct contract negotiations with, I messed that up, non-union personnel and not reconvene an open session. Move to go into executive session, discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, and that the chair declare that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the body and not reconvene an open session. And move to go into executive session, discuss strategy with respect to litigation, that chair declare that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the body and not reconvene an open session. And per Chapter 214, Section 1B, a person shall have a right against unreasonable, substantial, or serious interference with their privacy. The Superior Court shall have jurisdiction and equity to enforce such right and in connection therewith to award damages. Doug Moglen, aye.
Joe Didi, aye.
Russ Fox,